Welcome. I'm glad you're here to learn more about the progress build in the assessment system in Amplify Science. I'm Patty Works. This video is designed for you to pause and explore weather and climate on the Amplify Science platform. So you may want to pause the video and go ahead and open a tab navigating to the weather and climate unit now before we begin. This video session will focus on looking at the assessment system for weather and climate and how it's intertwined with the progress build. It's meant to follow part 1, where we analyze the progress build for weather and climate. We'll look at weather and climate today, but the process of looking at the progress build in the formative assessments will be something you'll want to do with each unit to maximize student learning and understand where students are in their meaning-making journey. This video is designed to be used after you've explored the progress build and assessment system video part 1 and learned about the progress build for weather and climate. It can be used independently or with a team as a tool to deepen your understanding of the conceptual ideas and how the assessment system is designed around them. And it can be used interactively with the participant pages, which are found on the FCPS Navigator 3rd grade science page under miscellaneous resources. You may want to print those or have an electronic copy available to use during the session. However, you can also use scratch paper if you'd like. Here's our objectives. By the end of this 2-part video workshop, we hope you'll be able to understand the connection between the progress build, the unit phenomena, and the Amplify Science assessment system. And we hope this will deepen your understanding of how to use the Amplify Science formative and summative assessment system. In part 1 of this workshop, we saw that the progress build for weather and climate included these levels. At level 1, students understood that weather had to be measured in the same way to allow for comparisons. Then building on that, during level 2 instruction, they came to understand that the pattern to the weather over a month allows for comparisons and predictions. And then the level 3 idea was that the annual pattern of repeating seasons allows climates to be compared and future weather to be predicted. So here's our agenda for today. We'll start out with an overview of the Amplify Science assessment system, and then we'll look at the formative assessments and summative assessments within this unit before we reflect and close. So how do your students show you what they know? When you see slides with the yellow dig in graphic, you may want to pause and discuss with your team. If you're working independently today, just stop and think for a moment. Well, many 3rd grade teachers answer that they gain information on student understanding informally throughout the lessons in a unit. You may get a window into their understanding as you discuss text and their associations with print, listen to their answers and discussion, or look at their written explanations and diagrams of models that they've drawn. I think you'll find that the Amplify Science assessment system gives you actionable information on student progress in ways just like that. Here's the assessment approach. Assessments are designed to provide credible information about student understanding of science concepts or about their dexterity with practices, cross-cutting concepts, or reading comprehension strategies. Assessments are actionable by providing specific suggestions for supplementing instruction based on the information provided. And they are timely in the way they're embedded into instruction. They provide insight to teachers as they're teaching, meaning instruction can be immediately adjusted based on the data they provide. This is different from traditional assessment, where teachers must wait until the end of the chapter or the unit to find out what students understand. So take a moment to read through the types of assessments in the Amplify program to yourself. As you can see, the majority of assessments are formative, providing insight into student learning and helping teachers plan to adjust instruction as needed. As a result, the formative assessments are not designed to evaluate student learning or provide grades. There are also formal assessment opportunities in each unit with the end of unit assessment or assessments. There are two parts to the end of unit assessment in weather and climate. The assessment system is three-dimensional, so teachers formatively assess students' conceptual understanding of the disciplinary core ideas, as well as their work with science practices and cross-cutting concepts. There are also formative assessments of literacy skills, and those assessments include guidance, a look for telling teachers how to gather information, and then now what suggestions to tell you how to respond to assessments, often in upcoming instruction. The critical juncture assessments occur at each end of each chunk of instruction for the progress build level. Each assessment is designed to provide information about student learning progress, and it tells you ways to tailor instruction to meet student needs. So again, these progress build ideas are the key understandings that the assessment system is built around. We explored these ideas in the Part 1 video. The black line at the bottom represents the pre-unit assessment before beginning instruction. It's a three-dimensional assessment meant to gauge students' initial understanding and preconceptions about core ideas in the unit, including the unit's focal cross-cutting concept, which is patterns. The end of unit assessment is represented by the dark line up at the top of the progress build. It's a summative 3D assessment to evaluate their growth and understanding about core ideas in the unit and the unit's cross-cutting concept. Also, this one looks at their ability to write a scientific argument and analyze data from information they've obtained. The pre-unit assessment reveals preconceptions, and it also reveals ideas and experiences that students can build on throughout the unit. It contains questions that get at students' initial understanding of weather and climate, their ability to analyze data and make predictions and comparisons based on that information. There is an assessment guide, and this all happens in the first lesson, 1.1. Being aware of these preconceptions is really helpful. The information in the assessment guide can really set the stage and help you know about any preconceptions to watch for that you will be addressing as you implement instruction throughout the unit. The pre-assessment pages are found under Digital Resources in Lesson 1.1, as is the assessment guide. Students first read a message that's sent to the Wildlife Protection Organization, and they add an answer to show their prior knowledge about safe habitats. In Part 2, they look at a line plot of temperatures in a month and make a prediction based on that data. Part 3 assesses students' abilities to read and apply information from a bar graph and make predictions based upon that information. So let's go into the platform now and look at where you find the pre-assessment and the assessment guide. So here we are on the main unit landing page for weather and climate. And to get to lesson 1.1, we'll click on chapter 1, and there we see the pre-unit assessment. And as we scroll down here, you can see that the pre-unit writing copy master is right here under digital resources, and the assessment guide is right below it. So you can click and open those up to read or to print if you'd like. The assessment guide that we saw there underneath digital resources includes suggestions to help connect the ideas to student experiences, ways that you can build on students' prior knowledge, and examples of ways that students might be demonstrating to you that they can apply the focal cross-cutting concept, which is patterns in this unit. It's an entry-level assessment of the student's ability to write a scientific explanation about weather and climate based on the data they've analyzed. and it will help tell you a little more about preconceptions about weather and extreme weather events. There are some things that may be preconceptions students have about weather and severe weather that you can keep your eye out for. Students may believe that weather is random. They've seen so much daily variability in weather that they may not have gotten the idea that there are patterns that occur when you look at the data over time. They may also think that extreme events mean there's no pattern to the weather, and they may not recognize that these weather events are notable because they're a deviation from the regular weather pattern. Don't worry though, experiences within the unit lessons will help you to address these common preconceptions. The critical juncture assessments, represented by the large hummingbirds that you see on the right-hand side of the screen, are formative assessments meant to gauge students' growing understanding and their preconceptions about core ideas in the unit. The critical juncture assessments occur after each level of the progress build has been taught to determine if students are ready for the next level of understanding or the next level of the progress build. The critical juncture assessments occur at key points in the unit where it's especially important that all students understand the content so they're well positioned for learning experiences to come. They gauge students' growing understanding about core ideas in the unit. They provide formative information, and they include specific suggestions for how to tailor instructional opportunities so that they're targeting lessons to a student's current level of understanding. There are 2 unit documents that provide detailed information about the assessments: the assessment system document and the embedded formative assessments. The assessment system contains a complete listing of all assessments in chronological order. The embedded formative assessments contain the complete text for the on-the-fly assessments with what you're looking for, and then with the now what sections, and the critical juncture assessments with assessing understanding and tailoring instruction sections. Okay, so we find these unit documents on that main unit landing page down underneath the chapter pictures. And the assessment system document that you see the arrow just indicated will explain the organization of the assessment system, list in order throughout the unit each assessment and tell you some bits of key information about it. And then it goes into an explanation of each type of assessment that's found in the unit. So here you see an example from that table that describes the assessment. It shows you what sort of evaluation guidance is there for you, that you can find stuff in the possible student responses and that there's an assessment guide. And then it also tells you which parts of the standards are being addressed by that assessment. The embedded formative assessments, the unit resource that's right down below that, explains what to look for at each assessment opportunity, and then it gives you guidance for instructional next steps. So you see the look for and now what sections, like on this on the fly assessment, with the same text that you would find if you were in the actual lesson. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the platform just a second to just point out where those documents are. So I'm going back using my breadcrumbs to the main unit page. I'm going to click jump down to unit guide. And then down here under teacher references, you see that assessment system document. And down below that, the embedded formative assessments. You're going to be going in there in just a minute and opening up those documents to use in the next section. So now you're going to be using either the embedded formative assessment document or the assessment system document to look for where these critical juncture assessments are. They occur at the end of each progress build level. So you can find where they are in either one of those unit resources. You're going to want to, in just a second, pause the video and then open up one of the documents. And on page 2 of your participant pages, you'll write down the location, which lesson the different critical juncture assessments are located in. And then when it says assess what understanding, you may want to copy down that critical juncture 1 assesses progress build 1 and write down what that progress build 1 idea is. We're going to talk through the 3 critical juncture assessments together in just a few minutes. So you can wait and fill in the last 2 columns. What do students do in this assessment and how are we going to tailor instruction? You can wait and fill them in as we talk through them. Or if you want to read through them now and jot that down for yourself, please feel free to do that as you locate them. Restart the video when you're ready to discuss, please. Okay, so here's what we found. Here are the location of the critical juncture assessments. In this unit, they're pretty close to the ends of the first 3 chapters, but sometimes that varies a bit from unit to unit. For more detail on the assessments, you can look at the platform lesson activity, where it will tell you whether or not you're using an investigation notebook page to collect student thoughts, or if it's something you're listening for in discussions or activity that students are participating in. Okay, so here's critical juncture assessment 1. This formative assessment is looking at students' understanding that in order to compare weather of different places, measurements must be taken in the same way. Students will complete Student Investigation Notebook, page 12. They look at evidence cards 1 through 10 in this lesson, and they look at which cards have strong evidence and which have weak evidence. And they're comparing that evidence to find out whether or not it is measured in standard units, temperature in degrees Fahrenheit and rainfall in millimeters. They select 1 strong and 1 weak example of evidence, and they use that to describe why that evidence is a strong or weak example on page 12 of their Student Investigation Notebook. If students don't demonstrate an understanding that weather can only be compared when you're using standard measurements, they suggest returning to the book, Sky Notebook, and looking at that data and asking them how they were able to compare the data on January 25th and 26th. Contrast this with asking how much information statements such as really snowy or very cold actually give them about the weather. Before students move on to the next chapter, we want them to be able to explain that they can't figure out which day was the coldest or which had the most precipitation unless there was a standard measurement that they could use to compare the weather. So when you look back at Progress Build Level 1, what do you notice? Yes, this assessment directly gives you information about their understanding of the Progress Build 1 idea, that weather is measured in the same way to allow for comparisons. So here's Critical Juncture Assessment 2. This gauges students' understanding of the amount of data required to find a pattern to the weather that allows for predictions of future weather. At this point in the unit, students should demonstrate understanding of the following critical concepts in their choices for strong evidence and in their responses to the questions about specific evidence cards. They should use this understanding to decide that only the evidence for 1 month is strong enough to allow them to make predictions and compare what the weather will continue to be on each island. In their reflective writing, students should indicate that the day's worth of data on evidence card 1 is not enough to make predictions about future days, but a month of data is. Make a note of students who included evidence for only one day of weather or those who discarded evidence cards with a month's data. Using evidence card 15, students should also predict that the next day's weather will fall within the range of 82 to 96 degrees Fahrenheit. So look for students who may have tried to land on a specific temperature or those who were unable to make a prediction. Observations are made during student-to-student discussion here. We want to hear students recognizing that one day of weather data is not enough to see a pattern or make predictions about weather in the future, and 1 month of weather data is enough to see a pattern, which can be used to make predictions about a day's weather in the near future, where it will fall within the range of temperatures for the preceding month. To tailor instruction, this assessment suggests using data from the book, Seeing the World Through Numbers, to spark discussion about the difference between what 1 day of weather data reveals versus what 1 month's data shows. Specific suggestions are given for data to compare here. Students return to graphs in the book to look at the data. This could be done as a whole group, with a small group, or with individuals, depending on the needs of your students. So remember that the Progress Build Level 2 concept was the pattern to the weather over a month allows for comparisons and predictions. This critical juncture assessment helps you get evidence of understanding on this idea quite clearly. In critical juncture 3, in this activity, students apply their understanding of weather patterns and climate to reflect on the problem of the orangutan reserve location and the future weather on Creek Island. The purpose of this critical juncture assessment is to gauge students' understanding that seasonal weather patterns allow us to predict future weather. Students should demonstrate understanding of the following critical concepts in their responses. A particular place's seasons repeat in a pattern every year, which constitutes the place's climate. These weather patterns can be used to predict the future weather in a place. And different places can have different climates. Students complete investigation notebook page 50, looking at line plots for temperatures in January and August on Creek Island. The questions assess whether students can predict future weather in a place by looking at data, and whether or not they believe all islands are likely to have this same climate. Suggestions to support students who need additional help with these ideas suggest meeting with the group during the next lesson as the class is evaluating evidence. Specific suggestions and prompts are listed to help develop these ideas with students, leading them to find examples of islands with differing climates. Additional suggestions are made for revisiting evidence cards to bring up these ideas in discussions. Critical juncture 3 clearly addresses finding out if students understand that the annual pattern of repeating seasons allows climates to be compared and future weather to be predicted. So, what are your key takeaways about the critical juncture assessments? Pause for a moment and share your ideas with your teammates. Teachers often say they're pleased with these features. The critical juncture assessments are just part of the teaching. They're not a stop, drop, and assess. They're easily actionable. They're just part of the lesson. They match the progress build levels really exactly, and they have some great suggestions to help improve student understanding. On-the-fly assessments, represented by the little hummingbirds within each level, are embedded formative assessments for noting students' progress with one or more of the following: disciplinary core ideas, science and engineering practices, and cross-cutting concepts. Often these are tied with literary skills as well, and several occur at each level of the progress build. On-the-fly assessments are the most frequently occurring assessments. They're quick checks for understanding designed to help you monitor and support student progress throughout the unit. They'll provide you with an opportunity to adjust instruction to meet student needs. They contain look for and now what evaluation guidance. And the text of the on-the-fly assessment can be found. It's accessible in that embedded formative assessment unit resource, as well as by clicking the hummingbird icon in the activity in which it appears. When you're looking at an activity that has an on-the-fly assessment, you can click on the hummingbird, and then it will show you the text of the assessment. So if you've clicked off of the instructional guide and click onto this, the embedded formative assessment will turn purple, and then you'll see this little blue banner appear. And when you click on that, you can see the full text of the assessment there as well. In each of the on-the-fly assessments, you'll start out seeing a section that has the look-fors. The look-fors describe what evidence of understanding you're watching for in the activity. Often it's something you're going to listen for in student discussion or student writing during evidence collection opportunities in the activities. The now what suggestions can really vary. They may vary as to when you implement them, right then in the moment, in an upcoming activity, or a suggestion for outside the lesson. And they may also vary in how you might implement them. They may tell you nothing's needed right now, just keep an eye on this student. They may suggest additional instruction or support, or give you targeted suggestions for revisiting an activity with some new questions. So now I'm going to ask you to open up the Embedded Assessments document on the unit page and look for the on-the-fly assessments that precede Critical Juncture 1. You're going to list them on page 3 of your handout. Select one and take a closer look if you'd like, and then you can share what you saw with your teammates. You may want to fill in the look for and now what information now, or come back and do that later. So you can pause the video now and rejoin after you've found the on-the-fly assessments. There are 2 on-the-fly assessments leading up to the first critical juncture. Remember, they'll help you see if students are understanding the concepts that build towards Progress Build Level 1, that weather is measured in the same way to allow for comparisons. Okay, so now we're going to locate and find the on-the-fly assessments leading up to Critical Juncture 2 and list those on your participant pages. So pause for a few minutes while you find those lessons. As you get closer to teaching these lessons, be sure to review the on-the-fly assessments to help gauge where your students are with literacy skills, practices, cross-cutting concepts, and science ideas. All of these formative assessments will help you see increasing understanding of the Progress Build Level 2 idea, that the pattern to the weather over a month allows for comparisons and predictions. Now you're ready to look for the on-the-fly assessments leading up to Critical Juncture 3. So please go ahead and pause and locate those in the embedded assessment document. As you can see, there are many opportunities for students to collect formative information for you to collect information, on students developing understanding. And there's some great suggestions about what to do to help students who are needing a little boost to understand Progress Build Level 3. Now, Chapter 4 examines weather-related natural hazards and how people can try to prepare for them, introducing a new problem. How can you protect buildings from damage by weather-related hazards? In this unit, there are some on-the-fly assessments after the third critical juncture assessment to help you watch for student understanding of these new but related ideas. So take a moment now and pause and see if you can find the 2 on-the-fly assessments that are built into Chapter 4 as you look at severe weather and modifications that can be made for that. Okay, so there are the 2, there's a student discussion and a student writing opportunity. You probably have noticed as you've looked at these on-the-fly assessments that they have you're assessing kids in all different modalities during discussion, during writing, sometimes as they're visualizing and creating models or using digital tools. There's all different kinds of modalities that are accessed in the assessments. The student self-assessments are opportunities to reflect on whether students understand or don't yet understand about the core concepts from the unit and the key ideas. These are optional activities. Last year, some teachers reported loving using these as science notebook reflection prompts. There's also a place to list the location of the self-assessments in your participant pages. They can be found in the assessment system document. So you may want to take a look and see if you can find where the self-assessments are. Investigation assessments are marked with a star on the assessment system graphic. The investigation assessment is a summative 3D performance assessment to evaluate students' performance of the science and engineering practices of planning and conducting investigations and analyzing and interpreting data, as well as their application of disciplinary core ideas and cross-cutting concepts. There's 1 investigation assessment for each grade level. And as you see, Balancing Forces holds the 3rd grade investigation assessment. In lesson 5.1 of the Balancing Forces unit, students collaboratively plan an investigation in small groups to find out how far a paper clip can be moved before the forces become unbalanced. They discuss changing just 1 variable at a time and the importance of doing multiple trials. On page 57 of their investigation notebook, they plan the assessment and then they conduct trials in small groups and share and discuss their findings. This presents the teacher with an opportunity to see how students are coming and understanding how to set up and carry out an investigation. So on this slide, you see the entire assessment system and how it is built around the unit's progress build. Remember, the black line at the bottom represents the pre-assessment. Within each level, there are several small on-the-fly assessments that will help you see how students are coming with Progress Build 1 ideas before that critical juncture assessment. Remember, the little blue smiley faces represent the self-assessments that you may choose to add in. And then this pattern continues with on-the-fly assessments leading up to a critical juncture assessment. And then at the very end of the unit, the top line represents the end of unit assessment or writing. So what does having this quantity of assessment opportunities do for students? And what does it do for teachers? Pause the video here for a moment and talk with your teammates. Well, the assessments work together as a system to monitor student progress across the progress build. Having so many assessments means teachers have a constant window into student understanding. And as such, it's likely a teacher will not be surprised by their class or by individual students' performance on the critical juncture or the end of unit assessments. There's not just one opportunity for students to show understanding and for teachers to respond, because the assessments are situated within a build of ideas. This gives multiple opportunities for students to show progress and for teachers to adjust instruction based on assessment data. So what is the summative assessment? Summative assessments are used to measure student learning at the end of instruction, and they serve as a final evaluation of the student's understanding of core ideas in the unit. The end of unit assessment or assessments summatively measure student mastery of the progress build. In grades 2 through 5, they are written assessments, whereas in K1, they were just oral assessments. They contain rubrics to help you analyze student responses, and they're typically administered in the last lesson of the unit, but sometimes there are 2 different parts, like in weather and climate. Okay, here's post-assessment part 1. Students are writing a scientific argument with the Wildlife Protection Organization as the audience to describe which island's weather will be the most like the weather where orangutans normally live. And they're supporting this with evidence using scientific language. Version B of the assessment has sentence scaffolds to help support student writing. You may choose to use either version A or version B. Last year, some teachers liked projecting version B, so students could see the scaffolds and choose to use some of them if it matched their writing style. Page 2 is the same in both versions of the assessment. The assessment guides contain rubrics for evaluating the 3 dimensions, and they give you some possible student responses. The assessment guides are found in the digital resources for that lesson. So in this case, in lesson 3.7 for the first part of the assessment. The assessment guide contains several pages of guidance for evaluating assessments. For this assessment, you're evaluating the science and engineering practice of engaging an argument from evidence, and you're looking at the science ideas developed in the unit, as well as assessing student understanding of the patterns found in weather and climate. In lesson 4.4 is where you'll find part 2 of the assessment. Here, students apply what they've learned about ways to mitigate severe weather near the Wildlife Protection Organization offices. They've analyzed data that shows that the area is very prone to lightning strikes, and they've learned a little bit about how to make changes to the building that could help prevent problems from this. They make a claim about what the Wildlife Protection Organization should do, and they describe their thinking based on evidence collected. Again, version B is addressing the same question, but provides more scaffolding for their answers. The assessment guide will lead you in looking at how students are doing with writing a design argument and whether they understand the science ideas involved. Okay, so let's reflect on what we've done in these 2 parts of the video. Our objectives when we got started were that we hoped you would understand the connection between the progress build, the unit phenomena, and the Amplify Science Assessment System, and hope that this has deepened your understanding of how to use the formative and summative assessments. So if you have teammates you're working with, you might want to pause right now and think and share with each other what takeaways you'll have from these sessions on the progress build in the assessment system. Please be sure to contact me with any lingering questions, or if you'd like help looking at the rubrics for the summative sessions. I'd be happy to do any planning together with you. Here's my contact information. Please email me if I can be of assistance. We can work together, or I can just shoot you back an email to answer some questions. I'm Patty Works, and my email address is pworks@amplify.com. Thank you so much for taking part in these 2 video sessions.